So I was thinking about all of the great opportunities for bosses in Terraria, and I came up with some of my own. Let's get started with the bosses already in the game, and then move on to what might be next. Now, Terraria already has a lot more bosses than the average sandbox adventure type game, simply because it's above average in every way. But that's beside the point. What I'm trying to say is that it could have even more bosses, and there's a great potential for original, interesting boss fights in the future. First, let's go over each boss and their respective biomes. The 15 bosses in Terraria are divided up into several biomes. The jungle, the corruption, the crimson, the dungeon, the ocean, the underworld, and an unassigned category for bosses that can be fought anywhere above ground. In pre-hard mode, there are 7 bosses. These bosses are not in any specific order. First, we've got the Eye of Cthulhu, a giant disembodied eyeball whose biome is unassigned and can be spawned anywhere on the surface. Next, the King Slime, a large blue slime featuring a crown, which is also in the unassigned category. Next is the Queen Bee, another giant creature who resides in the jungle. Fourth is the Eater of Worlds, a worm made of many segments who can be found in the corruption. Fifth is the Brain of Cthulhu, the giant brain with several small eyes as servants. This boss can be found in the Crimson biome. Following that is Skeletron, a floating skull with 2 skeleton arms. Skeletron is spawned in the dungeon by talking to the old man there. Finally, the player must defeat the Wall of Flesh in the Underworld. Beating the Wall of Flesh triggers Hard Mode, which contains the remaining 8 bosses in the game. Once in Hard Mode, there are 3 mechanical bosses. Each mech boss can be considered a tougher version of a pre-Hard Mode boss. Skeletron Prime, an upgrade of Skeletron with 4 arms and made of metal. The Twins, an upgrade of the Eye of Cthulhu with 2 eyes instead of 1, each with their own powers. And third, the Destroyer, a mechanical upgrade of the Eater of Worlds. All 3 mechanical bosses belong in the unassigned category, because they can be spawned anywhere. Next is Plantera, a sentient plant creature spawned in the jungle. After Plantera, the Jungle Temple is unlocked, allowing the ability to fight Golem in the temple. In the ocean, fishing with a truffle worm spawns Duke Fishron, a shark-related boss. Return to the dungeon to fight the Lunatic Cultist, a mage wielding fire, ice, and lightning, among other tricks. Finally, the Moon Lord, the final boss of the entire game. But you already knew all of that, because you clicked on this video. To recap, here are the biomes and how many bosses are in each. Tied for 4th place, with only 1 boss in each area, are the Corruption, the Crimson, the Underworld, and the Ocean biomes. In 3rd place, with 2 bosses, is the Dungeon. 2nd place is the Jungle, with 3 bosses. And in 1st place, no surprise, the Unassigned category, with 6 bosses. Those are all the biomes that have bosses, but what about the biomes that don't? Now you might be wondering why I'm talking about the bosses and their biomes from an 8-year-old game. Well, with the recent announcement of version 1.4 in 2020, there's room for speculation about future content. We went over all the biomes that had bosses, but what we didn't cover was the biomes that lack bosses. The most important biomes that don't already have bosses, in my opinion, are the desert, snow, space/sky, and cavern biomes. The official Terraria wiki lists the cavern as a layer, but I'm going to consider it a biome for my purposes. We know that at least 1 new boss will be added for Journey's End. So I made up some bosses and items and sprited some of them. I'm not that good at sprite work though, so I only made the items. For each boss concept, I'll go over 4 things: the boss itself, its attacks, its drops, and how to spawn it. First, let's talk about the snow biome. It's arguably the emptiest biome in the entire game, and could use something in it. For the boss, I was thinking that the boss could be some sort of large ice dragon. It would have 2 heads, and one would breathe blue fire that inflicts the frostburn debuff, while the other would shoot snowflake projectiles that shatter into pieces upon contact. One of its other attacks would be a dash across the screen, similar to the Queen Bee. Another attack could be the dragon looks upward and fires some of the snowflake projectiles into the air, which then fall down and must be avoided by the player. For its last attack, the dragon hovers above the ground and flaps its wings, which spawns small twisters of hail that spin across the ground. The dragon will drop 1 of 4 items, in addition to the possibility of the mask, trophy, or the baby penguin pet. The first item is the Frost Blades, a spell tome that shoots the same projectiles as the dragon's 2nd head. Second is the Amarok, a yo-yo that already exists in the game. Third is a sword called the Hailstorm, a play on the words hail and maelstrom. The sword inflicts frostburn and slows enemies down. Fourth, the Icicle Staff, a summoning weapon that spawns 1 of the dragon's twisters to protect you. Spawning. A large egg sits in the middle of the snow biome on top of a pedestal with an unlit frozen campfire beneath it. The structure is encased in a thick layer of ancient ice. Ancient ice is a block that I made up that requires 110% pickaxe power to break, meaning that it can be mined with the earliest hard mode pickaxe or drill. Once you break through the ice, right-click the campfire to light it, causing the egg to incubate and hatch, starting the fight. If you lose, the egg respawns at dawn. If you win, a spawner is craftable with items from the biome. Next, I'll cover the desert. My idea for the boss for the desert involves some sort of large creature that burrows in the sand and then jumps out and attacks. Although there's an ample amount of bosses that are just large enemies, and this is just the cliché desert boss in any game, we might as well add another. This boss could be modeled after the sand shark, and just like the sand shark, if the desert were corrupted, or crimsonized, or hallowified, then the model of the sand shark would change to fit the biome. For most of the fight, the shark will be underground, passing left to right, and the disruption in the sand above surrounds the player and gives them the suffocating debuff. Sometimes it'll jump up and attempt to bite you. Occasionally, the creature will jump up out of the sand and slam down, causing shockwaves of sand. The sand waves do damage, and if the player is on the ground, then they will be stunned for a while. After slamming down, the creature either sits still or flops around, creating smaller sand waves. After it is below half health, it will start to use the final attack, which is jumping up high in the air off screen and slamming down where its shadow appears. This attack causes an amplified effect of the other slam attack. For its drops, the boss drops one of 4 items in addition to the possibility of a trophy or mask. First is the Sandwave Staff, a magic weapon that uses the sand waves from its burrowing attack. The second drop is a Sand Dolphin, which moves extremely fast when in sand. It is a mount, and can be summoned with the Sandy Dolphin toy. The third drop is the Desert Quake Bow. It's a bow that fires upward similar to the Daedalus Storm Bow, and when the arrows come down they cause a ripple effect similar to the slam attack. The final drop is an accessory called the Desert Rose that sharply raises defense when the player is below 25% health. Summoning. A small desert temple rests in the center of every desert. The temple contains a small pyramid. To spawn the boss, the player must craft any one of the large gems and place them on the altar. The message, "The planet shakes violently down to its core," will be displayed. After a little while, the boss will appear. Third is the Cavern Lair. There's plenty of content in the Cavern Lair as it spreads across the entire world, but a generic underground boss would be nice. For the boss, I decided on some sort of large mole that, similar to the last boss, burrows into the ground and then charges at you. For its attacks, the mole charges at you from any angle in the ground at any time during the fight. It charges in a straight line and burrows again when it hits the ground on the other side. Much smaller moles can pop out of the ground and attack you randomly. Once the boss is at 1/3 health, the mole's hands will turn into drills, causing the attacks to be much faster and deal more damage. When it charges at you during this phase, in addition to being faster and more powerful, the drill causes random sparks to appear. The sparks fall to the ground and stay there for a few seconds. If the player's hit, they will take fire damage for a few seconds. In this phase, there is a chance that the mole will charge directly from the top of the screen. When it hits the bottom, it continues to drill in place for a few seconds, causing sparks to fly everywhere. Once it is defeated, the boss explodes. Its first drop is a mining tool called the Drill Arm. My idea for it will be kind of hard to explain. When used, the drill shoots out from the arm in the direction it is used, and it mines blocks in that direction until it goes off screen. It will also disappear if the arm is fired again. The purpose of this is to allow you to use other items while mining. It has 100% pickaxe power and has a 16.6% chance of dropping. The second drop is a pet spawning item called the Lucky Wrench. It spawns a mole with goggles that occasionally throws a wrench. This is a reference to the Rocky Wrench enemy from Super Mario. Its last drop is an accessory called the Gemstone Detector. Any gems around you will light up and a display will show you how many and what kinds are around you. To summon the boss, any underground chest can contain a suspicious diamond, which spawns the boss. If you use the diamond at any point in the cavern layer, the boss will spawn. Finally, let's move on to space. Space in Terraria barely exists, as there are only 2 enemies and 1 structure. For the boss, I've decided on a phoenix that would have a first phase, die, crumble into ashes, and then come back alive for a second phase. For its attacks, the phoenix hovers and hurls fireballs at you, occasionally flying to a different location. Sometimes it will spread its wings and flap violently, creating a strong wind which blows the player backward. Once it has reached half health, the fireballs will be larger and the wind stronger. It will also rapidly dash across the screen from many directions, during which it cannot be hit. After it stops dashing, a couple smaller phoenixes spawn, which dive at you and then disappear. Once it is killed, it will turn into a pile of ashes with a large fiery gem sitting in the middle. When you go to pick it up, the ashes shake and the phoenix is revived, with the gem floating above its head. If you do not attempt to pick up the gem, the phoenix will revive anyway after a few seconds. It has all of the same attacks, but even more powerful, and occasionally the gem will fire a beam at you. The phoenix has only 2 drops, and each has a 25% chance of dropping them. It could drop 1, both, or none. It can also drop the mask and trophy. The first is an accessory called the Gem of the Phoenix. When equipped, the same gem from the battle will appear above your head. It causes all attacks to inflict fire damage, boosts all damage by 10%, and allows you to dash. The dash also deals fire damage. The second item is a mount called the Spirit of the Sky. Similar to the drill containment unit, you are not allowed to use any other items while in the mount. It causes a bright orange phoenix aura to appear around you. The phoenix follows your mouse at 120 miles per hour, making it the best way to get around. Although you cannot attack while the mount is enabled, the phoenix makes up for it with its insane speed. As soon as hard mode begins, a larger sky island spawns somewhere in your world around the same height as other sky islands. On the island is an orange feather on a stand, called the Heart of the Sky. When it is broken, the phoenix will spawn. A new feather will spawn at the beginning of each day. Alright, that's all the boss concepts I came up with. I just think that these biomes don't have quite enough stuff to do, and a boss or two would help a lot. That's all for today. Thanks.